Hey, everybody. As always, this podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. You can go and get a free audiobook download by going to www.audibletrial.com/TNRL and sign up for a free 30-day membership. With that membership, it gets you a free download, and you can choose audiobooks from over 100,000 titles that they have available. All work on your Kindle MP3 player, iPad, iPhone.
I like the
iPo, audio device of your choice. Go do it. It's free. Take it away, Ken.
Jesus got out here.
I thought I was a good Christian.
Jesus died on the cross. I go to church every Sunday. Jesus got out here. Then I read that says Jesus died on a cross for a rotten hooker.
I thought I was a good Christian.
I go to church every Sunday.
I thought I was a good Christian.
I go to church every Sunday. I am a very religious person.
I thought I was a good Christian. The very lies the serpent told to Eve in the Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden. The gospel of Jesus Christ spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ spreads confusion and
Hey everybody, it's Monday, June 18th, 2012, This Non-Religious Life. I'm your host, Ken. All the way across the country, we have Bob.
How's it going?
And Jason.
Hello.
And you guys sent me an interesting article in the middle of the week, but I couldn't get to it. And I kind of wanted to hear what it was because the link was dead for some reason. So why don't you introduce that? Who sent it? Jason, was it you?
Which article are you talking about?
The one where you joked about me being in the passenger seat.
Oh,
No, Bob made that joke.
it was a guy in I want to say it was in California. It had to be in California. It had to be in L.A.
It was in Hollywood, apparently.
He was involved in a high-speed chase, and when they finally caught, and he actually hurt somebody. I think he
hurt several people. Yeah.
I don't know if there's any deaths involved, but there was some collateral collisions in the chase, and when police finally got him, he claimed that God had taken over and that he was an angel. And that God had taken over and was driving the car, not doing a very good job of it.
You watched the video of it, right?
No, I didn't see
you should
the
have
video.
seen the video. The dude's insane.
Yeah, and usually the high speed chase ends up with a low speed foot chase where they get out of the car and run.
The low speed foot chase reminds me of the end of Talladega Nights.
Yeah,
they get out and start running. That's funny. Why is it, it seems like when things crazy like this happens, I've heard more lately of God did this rather than, sort of the staple back in the 80s and early 90s, the devil made me do it.
Yeah, right. It's not the devil anymore, it's God.
Huh.
I don't know. It's an interesting observation, and I see it too.
I think maybe the devil's taking vacation, so God's got to check his inbox or something.
Yeah, but not only was God telling this guy what to do, but he was an angel of God, and so he was doing God's bidding, or I don't know, letting God. Did we joke about the Bill Maher's when he was criticizing Rick Perry for the prayer meeting? It was his domestic policy of "Yeehaw, Jesus, take the wheel."
Yeah, this guy was just acting on a more personal level.
Yeah.
Say he's got a personal relationship with God, so personal that he lets him drive his car.
Yeah. There's really no. I mean, obviously the guy is a nut job, so whatever. But again, one more instance of religion allowing people to do awful things.
Yeah. However, I think this person's probably fairly unbalanced either way. So
Yeah. Clearly
with or without religion,
diagnosable.
he might have done something crazy. But it's definitely interesting that psychoses like this tend to manifest themselves in religious sort of religious delusions.
Yeah. I know that comes as no shock. Which I'm always there's always things like that where I'm always reminded of that oatmeal cartoon with the militant atheists. Let's drink microbrews and talk about space.
Yeah. So did you guys hear about the whole shitstorm that's going down in the Vatican right now?
Oh yeah. And what's fucked up about that is that guy who's his butler is in jail.
Yeah. He's the only arrest made so far. For viewers who might not know what's going on, a whole ton of documents were leaked from the Vatican, and these are documents straight from the desk of Pope Palpatine himself.
Pope Palpatine.
He looks like Emperor Palpatine.
I
He
agree.
does. He really does. So Benedict XVI's desk himself, and that of his personal secretary, and these are documents sort of undermining the Secretary of State, Cardinal Bertone?
I believe so. Yeah.
And sort of like demonstrating a sort of like power struggle within the Vatican itself, which the Vatican is denying. But I mean, there are a ton of documents, and the reason why the butler was arrested is because they found Vatican documents in his apartment.
Well, so what I read about the documents that he kept back, they're I guess a lot of them are like financial statements and bank statements and shows like a lot of money transactions and from what I get, it's a very convoluted accusation, but at the end of the day, it shows that the Vatican was they were involved in like money laundering and payoffs and all the stuff, all the really sort of dirty stuff that they'd been accused of for all these years of doing. This guy sort of has the proof that it was going on.
The Vatican laundering money and being corrupt? Oh dear God, say it ain't so.
I know that comes as a shock.
What a shock.
But apparently the guy who was the butler, he was the butler for the Pope for many, many years, if not decades, and he was saying that these things would cross his desk, and he couldn't just ignore them anymore. So he started squirreling them away. Oh no! Oh well, I needed Ken to respond. He knows more about this than I do. Where'd he go?
Hey, okay, cool. So we are back. Sorry about that, everybody. One of the perils of doing a live show. So, Bob, you were talking about Vatican.
Oh, so the butler he was the butler for the Pope, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, so he'd had that position for decades, and he was commenting about how he would see these, he would see the paperwork go across his desk for these shady transactions, and it would just happen more and more and more, and he couldn't reconcile that with his faith, and so then he started keeping them and making copies, and now he's he blows the whistle on it, and rather than the Vatican going, wow, man, this is really messed up and we should clean house and fix this, they arrest him.
Yeah. I guess that's the problem of kind of living in a country that, could fit within my neighborhood, essentially, that's run by the church, Well,
I mean, all right, so the Vatican is a sovereign nation, but I don't know, man. It just seems like this is a human rights violation.
Sure. I'm going to say it gets tricky because, they're definitely, he definitely stole things, but at the same time, like, it's stuff that points out the fact that government, i.e. the church, is super, super corrupt and doing really, really sketchy things. So, he shouldn't be in prison, but it's that world of nuance.
If only Hitchens were alive to see it.
Yeah. Maybe he is in our hearts. No, joking.
That's been the direction of all nations. It's not just the Vatican. Is anytime, I mean, before whistleblowers were held up as good people, but now even in the States, the Vatican, whistleblowers, they are now being punished for exposing the weaknesses of their, like in the Vatican here, and it's just weird how we are moving towards that in all aspects, not just in governments, but in all. Well, I mean, he's a whistleblower. That's what he is. Right. Bottom line, he saw some injustice. He saw something wrong, and he documented it and exposed it in hopes, I guess, to make it better. And now he's being punished for it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, look at WikiLeaks or any of the ag-gag bills that are being passed in states around the U.S., where, undercover surveillance that shows things that are illegal. Could you imagine if the people who exposed Watergate were arrested? They
were arrested.
Well, but I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, instead of going after people committing crimes, they said...
you mean instead of Woodward and Bernstein, like, what if Woodward and Bernstein got arrested?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean...
could you imagine, it'd be like this, to touch on a topical note, because Rodney King just died. Imagine if, instead of how that entire thing played out, the guy who videotaped the Rodney King beating was arrested instead. And then the whole thing hushed up. When simply being a witness to a crime is a crime in and of itself, you definitely have a problem.
Well, I
agree.
It's becoming that.
Yeah.
I mean, they are making it where if you witness a crime, I mean, there's a case right now, I don't remember where it's at, but here in the States, that they're trying to charge people who witnessed the crime.
Yeah. And I mean, that's like I said, with WikiLeaks and all the ag-gag bills currently getting passed in different states where simply documenting and witnessing things that are blatantly illegal are now a crime. That's pretty much what this butler did. So it gets to be a really sort of hairy situation, Yes, he stole documents, but I think you have to look at the fact that isn't it for the greater good that he took those documents? He's exposing blatant corruption, lies, money laundering, all things that we really knew were happening, but now we have the hard evidence of it.
If I remember right, that guy, the butler, whose name I forget, if the charges that were leveled against him, it wasn't something as simple as he stole something. It was like the crime was that he betrayed the confidence of the Pope.
Yeah.
Not that he stole.
He's accused of aggravated theft.
Is that what it is? Aggravated theft?
Yeah.
Because some
aggravated
of
theft.
The talk I was listening to was that he violated this trust or the confidence of the body of the Pope or whatever. And
yeah, no. I mean, no doubt that's probably part of it. I mean, remember this is a church state, so. But I like to think of aggravated theft. I like to think of it as like, this guy stole these things, and the Pope is very aggravated that he got caught.
Yeah. What makes it so aggravating that he did it,
or that now everyone knows what you're doing? Yeah. It's funny because on Huffington Post, which is where I found this, the Vatican actually blames the media for the whole scandal, like the whole shitstorm that's going down. It's not like, talk about like passing the buck and not taking, like not taking responsibility for things. Like, you're being sketchy and doing things that are, I mean, horrible, like horrific things. Money laundering, all these things that are, by ridiculous standards, immoral. Let's just call it immoral. But it's not the Vatican's fault. It's the media for talking about it.
Yeah. That is a tried and true tactic. Shift the blame.
Yeah. How dare you talk about how we're money laundering and, we know about sex abuse scandals, and how dare you air our dirty laundry? That's our dirty laundry. We like to keep it at the bottom of a hamper.
We talked about this a little bit last week about what would be the fallout, if the Catholic Church collapsed, and I meant to do some homework, but I'm going to do it. I'll do it for next week because I didn't get a chance this week. But there's a Catholic charity in Norfolk. It's I forget what it's called. But we have a Catholic charity here that feeds the hungry and clothes the poor, and I meant to look into it to see exactly how much federal dollars they get, and how much is paid by the church and how much is paid by the by the federal government or even the state government, and I'm gonna try and dig that up for next time, and we'll see what it is.
Well, because of the other show that Matt and I do, the Coalesce, we've been getting a lot of comments and feedback from the show, and since we were talking about the Vatican in that show, I've gotten a lot of emails. One person saying that they actually have done fundraising for Catholic charities, and they said that they have a large amount of large donors, but a majority of their money comes from endowment funds.
Endowments from who? Like private donors?
Like from private donors, and then they
they
apply for.
That happens a lot. I mean that's like I was saying last week is that they're probably having to do that now because the church dollars went away long ago. The federal dollars are going away, and so now they have to get them from private donations. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I'm going to try and look up the one here in town, and see what see if I can figure out what the deal is, and maybe that'll tell us something. I mean, again, it'll be a one-off case. We can't judge everything by this, but it's curious. I'd be curious to know what's going on in our backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see how much funding actually goes into it from a taxpayer perspective. As someone who lived in Norfolk for 3 years, I paid my fair share of taxes while living there. Moving away from this, but sort of staying on the same vein as clergy and such. I know we were talking about the Clergy Project right before the show. So Bob, why don't you introduce that?
Who's on the box? Is the Banana Man? Is that that's
Comfort?
Ray Comfort, the Banana Man. Remember him? The atheist nightmare, the banana. He has a website blog called On the Box.
On the Box. Yeah.
And it's him standing on his soapbox, and he wrote a lengthy
just awesome.
He wrote a lengthy blog post about the Clergy Project, and the Clergy Project is this project. It's a group, organization, website, and it's a joint effort between the Richard Dawkins Foundation, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and one other group that I can't remember. And what it is a resource for clergy members who have lost their faith and want to get out of the pulpit. And the reason it got started is because the guy who's the head of the Freedom from Religion, or co-chair of the Freedom from Religion Project, is Dan Barker, and he used to be an evangelical minister, and he lost his faith and started looking at the problems in church and religion, and he got out of faith, and so now he's an atheist / free thinker, and but what he realized is that when you spend so many years in the pulpit, when you spend so much time as a preacher, you don't really have a lot open to you. Your world is coming to an end, and you don't have a lot of resources available to you. And so what the Clergy Project intends to do is to provide a support group, a network for ex-clergymen. And I think that's a great idea. I think it's a great organization because, imagine it's not just a guy who's worked at a factory for 10 or 20 years and then the factory closes and he has to get another job. These are people whose whole ideology, whose whole lives are wrapped up in faith and in prayer and religion. And now that's gone from them.
Yeah, it seems to be a pretty horrific struggle for anyone who's trying to get out of being behind the pulpit. I know there are a good number of people who are very vocal, like atheists and agnostics nowadays, who used to be evangelical ministers, and it seems like their story is usually one fraught with hardship. It's very difficult because everyone you surround yourself with at that point typically are believers and devout ones at that.
Right.
You have your support staff at your congregation. You have your congregation themselves. And it's not. I actually saw. It was an article about a pastor who came out as an atheist, and the congregation were talking about him, and they were saying, they look to the preacher as sort of like a spiritual superhero. So when he loses his faith, it's a major shock, and they don't know how to react to him anymore.
Well, Comfort,
so he loses his entire socialized base.
Well, Comfort is taking the different angle from it, saying that they're doing Christians a favor.
Well, why? So one, when I was going to get to that was that, like the purpose of the Clergy Project is, imagine you're that guy who's been a minister, for 30 years, and then you lose your faith. So either you fake it for the rest of your life, for the rest of your career, or you get out and you do something else. But what kind of job skills do you have as a minister, who's no longer in the pulpit? You really can't do anything. So what are you going to do? How are you going to support your family? How are you going to pay the mortgage and just have money to get by? Your prospects are pretty slim. And so one of the hopes of the Clergy Project is that this would provide a network and a support group to help people through that transition. And so anyway, in the Ray Comfort on the Box blog post, he seems very smug and tongue-in-cheek when he's doing it, but he was like, no, these guys are doing us a favor. And he's like, and I don't mean that sarcastically. He says, I mean it sincerely. I really think that they're doing us a favor. Because what happened, the Clergy Project just recently started in like the last month or so. It's just gotten going. And the activity on their website and the people who have signed up and the members has far exceeded what they expected to get. The traffic has been much, much greater than what they thought. The membership is much, much greater than they thought. And so, one, that's kind of telling, and two, they think it's great. And so, of course, Comfort is like, they're doing us a favor because what they're doing is and here he commits the true Scotsman fallacy and even says it, they're not true Christians.
Yeah. He really likes to fall back onto that the no true Scotsman fallacy. When I've seen him when he's doing his sort of like, I just call them street performances. He's out there trying to convince people on the street through a lot of like just faulty rhetoric and street showmanship, I guess. which he likes to do around here, actually. But he'll say, when people say, I used to be a Christian, and he tries to catch them and be like, oh, so you had a personal relationship with God, and they're like, well, I think so, and he's like, well, therefore God exists, right? Otherwise, you're not a true Christian. True Christians have a personal relationship with God. It's the end presupposing the first, and you can't have been a Christian if you aren't now. It's so riddled with like logical fallacies. It makes me want to kind of vomit in my mouth a little bit.
Well, that's the case he makes with regards to the Clergy Project. All of those ministers that have lost their faith, well, they were never true Christians to begin with.
Yeah.
And thank you, Clergy Project, because now you've just, separated the flock from the wolves, or whatever metaphor you want to put
the
on it.
The wheat from the chaff.
You've done our work for us, because we would have eventually found out that they weren't true Christians. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, like, well, what would you do about it? Like, are you going to bring back stoning? Is that what's going to happen?
Yeah. He's going to try and make some more interesting analogies about how evolution is faulty using more genetically modified crops.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he could just do like he does his "Are you a Christian" test that he had at the bottom of that article. Did you take that?
No.
I took the "Are you a Christian" test, and it ask, have you ever stolen anything, no matter how small it is, and you have yes or no. And then it says, have you ever told a lie, no matter how small it is, yes or no? And then it goes, have you looked towards other gods as idols or whatever, yes or no? And then there's like 5 questions, and it says, this is how you scored on the first 5 of the 10 commandments, and this is the way God judges you during judgment days by these 10 commandments. Do you think you would be innocent or guilty by judging of your score of how you answered the 5? And you can say innocent or guilty. And so I put guilty, and it says, do you think you're going to go to heaven or hell? Was the next one. So I said hell. And it says, yes, you are correct. You will go to hell. And
what does he win?
And then it says, does this worry you? Yes or no? And I put no. And then the next page was like, well, it should worry you. And this is why. And they put, scripture verse. And it was just so funny. It's like, okay, I see where it's just a loop.
Yeah. The Bible is true. Here, let me quote the Bible to show you why.
Well, his arguments, he's talking about like, these true Christians and how if these guys who are members of the Clergy Project, they're not true Christians. They never were. I don't know. Like, one, he misunderstands the purpose of the Clergy Project, because the Clergy Project didn't cause anyone to lose their faith. It's a resource for people who have, and 2, he has this idea, this whole like true Christian thing, that points out to me to be some of the more despicable parts of the Bible and religion. Like, I really, really do not like this idea that I am born wicked and deserving of hell. Like, that is crap. That's the part that bothers me sometimes the most about religion.
Well, you are pretty wicked.
This idea that, I know, that we are just born these base creatures who deserve punishment. I don't get that. I don't agree with it at all. I think that we're better than that, and we're born, these social animals that strive for goodness, not these base creatures that deserve punishment. Yeah. I don't know. I find that to be one of the more detestable aspects of religion.
Yeah, it's the classic sort of abusive relationship. It's abusive and then convinces you that you deserve the abuse. If it's almost like spousal battery.
Like what?
Spousal abuse.
Oh, spousal abuse.
Battery.
Yeah, I know. It sounds just like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. One spouse beats the other one, but at the same time convinces the other one that they need them, and that this is only happening because they deserve it. It's a fairly despicable. I don't know what else to call it other than like psychological trick. You know, it's pretty cruel, even in its lesser forms.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, you see all the time the battered wife with a black eye. Well, I deserved it.
I did burn his pasta. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know,
exactly.
Right? I know, and that's horrible. That's horrible. You shouldn't have to live that way.
No. And it's a staple of religion. You know, religion is a social construct built around control. It's built around controlling populations. And how do you control populations? Make them believe that they need to be controlled. You know?
Yeah, I mean his whole blog post too, and he throws some fire and brimstone at it as well with the hell thing, because he's like, when you die, and we all do, except one guy, you're going to be judged, and if you don't measure up, the only way to get there is this guy, and if you don't, you're going to go to hell. I mean, he's awful. And,
I like that. I like that we all
that,
die except for one guy, because it makes me think about the the most interesting man in the world meme.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Dos
I
Equis
love
guy.
that guy.
I saw one with Jesus, and it was like, I don't always die, but when I do, I don't.
Yeah.
What
That
kind of sacrifice is that, by the way? I just want to talk about that for a second. What kind of sacrifice is it to kill yourself, but not really die?
That's the only way you should do it.
In fact, in Comfort's blog post, he gets into that. He has the worst like pop culture theology going that I've ever seen, and I'm sure like a guy like Matt is just shaking his head because he's awful. Because he throws around the ideas of the Trinity too, and he's like, and here's Jesus, and he's totally God, but he was totally man, but he was perfect, but he was God, and he lived forever, but he died for you, and it really runs circles around my brain.
Yeah, it's I mean, we've talked about the Trinity at length, but yeah, I mean, there are whole vast sections of that sort of reasoning that, I mean, if you think about it too long, you'll go cross-eyed.
That yeah, and he talks about this idea of the sacrifice that Jesus made for us, but you know, if you think about it just a little bit, like he's still God, right? So it's not much of a sacrifice. He had to know he was coming back. Do you watch Mr. Deity?
Yeah, I've seen the first couple seasons.
In the first season of Mr. Deity, when he's got Jesse, who's Jesus, and they're talking about the crucifixion, and Jesse's like, "Oh man, Dad, I'm really not so keen on this idea of crucifixion. I mean, I don't know, man. It seems a little harsh." And Mr. Deity's like, No, it'll be okay. It's like it'll happen on a Friday evening sometime, and we'll get you down there by like Saturday. And then you're back up here by Sunday. It'll be great. It'll be okay. It's really not that big a deal.
Yeah. I love Mr. Deity. Anyone who hasn't seen that show, look it up. It's hilarious. But yeah, no, it's not really a sacrifice if you're God, you know. Dying, even the idea of an afterlife in general sort of dilutes the idea of sacrifice in general. It's one of the reasons why in the Old Testament, child sacrifice was considered such a big deal, because there was no afterlife really in ancient Judaism.
Well, in the ancient, the Old Testament Judaism, wasn't the typical practice like sacrifice the firstborn?
Seems to be that way, at least in the northern kingdom of Israel. Yeah, I mean, it's
not the firstborn goat. I mean that too, and the firstborn cow, that too, but the firstborn person.
Yeah, the firstborn of everything, including your sons, was to be given to the Lord. The language is identical when it's talking about your kids as it's talking about, young goats or bulls or sheep or any animals. Even the first crops were offered up as a burnt sacrifice. Interesting fact. You can check out the site, find my book, the Pentateuch, source critical version of the 5 books of Moses. It seems like in the Elohist source, the common story about Abraham and Isaac, where Abraham's told to sacrifice Isaac, his son, the sacrifice itself is the last place in the e-source you hear of Isaac. So it seems like, as the story went in the Northern Kingdom, Abraham went through with it.
Oh yeah, I'd heard that before.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I heard Price talking about that.
I think I bounced the idea off Price once. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. Oh yeah, who else was I listening to? They were talking about the this idea of that sacrifice and Hitchens called it scapegoating a lot, but someone else was making the comment about the when the Christian missionaries got to the Aztec and the Mayan cultures, that they were so easily assimilated into Christianity because they looked around and they were like, hey, you guys believe in human sacrifice, and they're like, yeah, and they're like, we do too. You only got to do it once though, and we already did it, so it's all good.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Christianity. It's funny because Christianity is based on essentially a blood sacrifice, but then again it isn't. But then again it is.
Right.
But then again it isn't.
I don't know. Just that idea that Comfort puts out that we are deserving of punishment, deserving of death, and aren't you lucky that some guy took it all on himself to lift this from you? That drives me up a wall.
I just like the fact that of the argument that we should all sin, because if we don't, Jesus died in vain.
For nothing.
I mean, we should embrace sin. I love that.
Yeah.
I've seen the meme going around now about if there is a hell, you'll be in good company.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like I've said for a while. Go to heaven for the weather, but go to hell for the company. But to be serious about it, the idea of Jesus died for your sins, therefore you have to be good, is such a horrible guilt trip. Like the idea is absolutely reprehensible. It's so abhorrent to me, and it's a guilt trip. Like you are made to be just so disgustingly flawed. You're a horrible, base creature. Like, how does a perfect God create imperfect things? If he was perfect, he wouldn't have planted that little tree so close to Adam and Eve. Or maybe he would have built a damn fence around it. Would an electric fence be too much to ask?
Yeah.
He's an omnipotent God. Like, razor wire? Come on, God.
Yeah, and this idea of the fall too, that we're guilty of crimes committed by mythical creatures that never existed. I don't know.
Snakes are real, Bob.
The
Snakes
fall.
Snakes are real, Bob.
The fall bothers me too.
Yeah, no. The fall is probably the root of all that.
And if you talk to somebody who has a more sophisticated theological viewpoint, that they'll admit, like, okay, Adam and Eve, it's metaphor and fine, but they still have this belief in this idea of the fall, and they'll say, like, well, sure, it didn't happen in a day, it wasn't like one event, but there's something in our past that has caused us to fall away. There is this idea of the fall. It's intrinsic to the theology.
Aren't there 2 falls in the Bible, the one of man and one of Satan or Lucifer?
That's actually not in the Bible. That sort of comes around later, sort of medieval era. Not actually in the Bible. If you're talking about like when the angels rebel against God.
That's not apocryphal. That's just folklore, right?
It is apocryphal. I believe I want to say it's Slavonic Enoch, which is a sort of medieval apocryphal book. I want to say it's Slavonic Enoch. It's been a while since I've read it, but it became really popular folklore. I mean, but really, isn't that what they all are?
Yeah, sure.
But so explain. I mean, because I've been in church sitting down, and they explain
when they talk about the fall. Okay, so Satan, Lucifer, whether it's folklore or apocrypha, Satan fell from the Lord, right? Satan fell from. He was
cast out.
He was the morning star. He was cast out. So there's that fall. But when theologians are talking about the fall, they mean the fall of man.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying there's only two falls that are taught, that are part of the, I guess, the religion, and that's the fall of man, which is why we have to turn to God, forgive our sins or whatever, and then the fall of Lucifer.
Yeah, it's a medieval interpolation. There's a few passages that sort of hint at the idea. But it requires some like weird kind of, real strange exegesis, sort of pin together a couple things that sort of point to an idea that, and it kind of stems out of the idea that in the Old Testament, Satan is God's right-hand man. He's like a special ops sort of undercover agent who just goes around testing people to make sure they're worthy of God's love. But in the New Testament, you sort of see Satan as like an antagonist who's sort of against God. And I think it kind of stems out of the way Ha-Satan was translated into diabolos in Greek from Hebrew. Where, in one means the adversary and one means the accuser, and sort of the cultural context got lost. And so the devil became more of a demon character rather than an angelic figure. And that sort of ran away with itself into the Middle Ages, where they came up with this whole idea that, Satan was in heaven as Lucifer, and then sort of rebelled against God. The whole idea is that God created man and wanted all the angels in heaven, which were absolutely perfect, to bow down to this imperfect, mud puppet. And Satan thought it was just absolutely ridiculous. He didn't want to worship humans. He wanted to worship God, and rallied up like half the forces of heaven to go against God, and God cast them all out and turned them into demons. And that's where the demons come from in the Old Testament. It's weird because it's reading the differences between one book and the other book back into each other.
Do the other like say like the other Babylonian and the other cultural myths, do they show up as Satan? Do they show up in like the Old Testament dressed up as Satan? Isn't like Moloch a Babylonian god or another culture's god that shows up in the Bible, but they call him this, but then he's thought of as Satan? It's just taking the other cultural devils and dressing them up in the Old Testament, and all that falls under the umbrella of Satan. Is that how it happens? Am I reading that right?
In Christianity, kind of. You ended up getting there were a number of sort of evil gods and demiurges and demons. When you read through the Old Testament, and Moloch is definitely one of them. You have the condemnation of sacrificing children to Moloch in the Old Testament. And then you kind of have it hinted at in the New Testament when they talk about Gehenna, because that's kind of the inference, is that there was human sacrifice to Moloch. And you don't want to end up down in Gehenna where you're going to get tossed into the rotting, festering trash pile and sacrificed to Moloch. But it's more of a Christian interpolation of taking these characters, Azazel and Moloch, and even characters from Jewish folklore like Beelzebub and Asmodeus and Belial and all these other characters, and sort of Baal, putting them all together and making them all Satan.
I remember being in Sunday school when I was a little kid, and like I said, nominally religious, but every once in a while we went to Sunday school, and they would start telling these Bible stories, that were like God and Satan, or Jesus and Satan, and the devil and Satan, and Lucifer, and I'd start getting all the names confused, and I was really, really confused. I could never keep them straight, and then I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, and in the
and then you understood.
Dragons Monster Manual, in the first edition of the Monster Manual, has all the devils and their histories and their names all laid out. And I was like, wow, okay, now it makes sense.
Yeah, Asmodeus and
Belial.
Let me it gives you their alignments.
A loop in here, a curveball. I mean, I watched, it's on Netflix. It's called Reveal 666. It's apparently a Christian documentary about Satan. And it's one of the worst documentaries you'll ever see. I turned it off halfway. They were going through the list of all the serial killers. Well, the title screen that started this segment was like, "Does the devil walk among us?" Yes, we have proof. And it said that every serial killer, everyone who's done horrible deeds throughout history, was born on a devil's holiday. And they showed all these serial killers, and they said, like, the one serial killer was born on Friday the 13th. And, and I was like, really, I can't watch this.
They conflate every
It was so
every
bad.
myth and
Yeah.
ideas. You don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, man.
It wasn't even a good story. I would have stuck around and finished watching it if it was a good story, but it wasn't. Yes.
That sounds awful.
So we got to segue into our book plug for the week, and actually this sort of makes sense a little bit. Our book plug for the week is another Richard Dawkins book. I know we fall back on him a lot, but he's really, really good. And
also, it gets really hard to come up with new books every week.
Yeah, and the ones So this is Dawkins' newest book. It's called The Magic of Reality: How We Know What's True. And I think it's very timely to maybe look at this book because, one, he's involved with the Clergy Project. Two, devils and demons aren't real. And three, we just had the transit of Venus, which is almost like concrete proof about how we know the universe is the way it is. So you can get that book at www.audibletrial.com/TNRL and sign up for a free 30-day trial. And what that gets you a choice of a free audiobook to download. And this is a good one. Richard Dawkins, The Magic of Reality: How We Know What Is True. And I've read this book, and it's an interesting book because it's an interesting book because he gears it to a younger crowd. He wrote this book with the intention of like young readers and he sort of explains the scientific method. He explains how we know these things are true. How did we make these discoveries? And every chapter where he's looking at something, he prefaces every chapter with sometimes a Judeo-Christian myth, but sometimes it's from Scandinavia or Africa or Central America, of some myth that explains these phenomena that he's going to talk about later, and he shows like how these are the myths that people believe, but this is how we know what's true, and so that's the scientist side of Dawkins. I guess the activist side of him is moving forward on the Clergy Project. But the scientist side of him is all about the transit of Venus. Did you get to see the transit of Venus?
I actually watched it online.
Yeah.
It sucks. I was working that day, so I didn't get a chance to go up to Griffith Observatory and see it.
I bet that was packed.
Oh yeah, and it's always packed up there, but I can imagine it was probably just crazy packed.
It was kind of a letdown here because it was really cloudy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was very cloudy that day in Norfolk.
It's cloudy here a lot right now. I should say smoggy. June is terrible in
But
LA.
I heard that I heard some people say that it's so visible, it's so easy to see that all you need to see it is a pair of binoculars and just a piece of cardboard to focus the image on.
Somebody, I think it was Skeptics Guide to the Universe, said that that's how they saw it. And I know people who did the, the not the binoculars, but they had the little box with the mirrors in there and held up the glass to it. But,
I remember making those for a solar eclipse when I was in like 4th grade.
yeah.
So this is interesting, and one, it's really cool. Like I didn't realize the importance of this event. But did you know that the last time this occurred, Thomas Jefferson was involved in a global experiment to they had people all over the world, as far away as they could in the known world then, and they were taking measurements of the transit of Venus, and it allowed them to calculate the distance from the Earth to the Sun and the distance of Venus to the Sun, and they got to at the time the distance from the Earth to the Sun was thought to be like 50 million miles. That was their best guess that they could come up with. But then they did this experiment with different people triangulating from the transit of Venus, and they got up to 90 million miles, which is
pretty damn close.
About what it is now, 93 million miles.
Yeah. Isn't that cool how science figures things like that out?
Yeah, I mean, like, one, I think it was interesting, and two, like, I didn't know Thomas Jefferson was involved.
Yeah.
The man was a polymath. He had his fingers in everything.
But you think about an event like that that's like a once in a lifetime event. It's not going to happen again. And
not until 2117, I believe.
He took advantage of it,
Yeah.
and and I was listening to the Thomas Jefferson Hour because I started listening to the Thomas Jefferson Hour again because I wanted to see what Clay Jenkinson had to say about the Dave Barton book, The Jefferson Lies, which in the Dave Barton book, The Jefferson Lies, that's where he's painting that picture about Jefferson being an evangelical Christian. Our founding fathers wanted the wall of church and state to be, one way. He wanted religion in the public square, and it's a mess. Barton is a
our thoughts on
poor scholar and a almost outright liar.
Well, when it comes to that issue, we can almost bet that it's not going to be accurate when it's coming.
Well, it's funny because at the end of the day, what happens is all Barton does is he is in his book, The Jefferson Lies. Jenkinson described it as he casts the evangelical net through everything that Jefferson ever wrote or said and uses it to snag things that have an evangelical connotation or could be, if taken out of context, could be construed as evangelical.
Yeah, it's called quote mining. Which is exactly
and he's really good at it.
It's the same deal that evangelical Christians will do or creationists will do when they want to try and discredit Darwin, and they'll bring up that quote Darwin had about the eye. It's hard to imagine that something as complex as the eye came about through natural processes, and that's where they stop. They leave out the fact that Darwin also he was commenting on the fact that it's so amazing that something as complex as the eye did come about through natural means. It's hard to imagine, but it did because it's so complicated, and they sort of stop. And then they say, "Look at this! Look what he said."
Even Darwin said this.
Yeah.
It's very disingenuous.
Yeah, it's about as disingenuous as you can get.
I guess one of the things. No, it gets better. Barton does one better. Apparently, there's like a shipping manifest that Jefferson. They say Jefferson wrote about a shipping manifest, and then Jefferson signed it. And he signed it. What Barton says is he signed it. Thomas Jefferson in the year of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's so stupid.
Well, it's absolutely true. But
Yeah.
what he doesn't tell you is that on that particular piece of paper, it was a printed form. It was a printed form that had
already had that.
It already had it there, and so Jeffrey.
You had to put in the numbers.
Yeah, it was like a printed form that somebody gave the president to sign. Here, President, here's some shipping manifest where they had, the name of the ship on the top and all the cargo filled in on a form, a printed form. And then Jefferson signed it and put the date on it, and on the printed form it said, "In the year of our Lord Jesus Christ," which, admittedly, to say "in the year of our Lord" was not unusual, but to say "in the year of our Lord Jesus Christ" was. However, Jefferson didn't physically write that; he just signed the form that said it.
And it doesn't matter anyway. I mean, it's no different than writing AD after something. When AD just means Anno Domini, which is the year of our Lord.
No, after death. It stands for after death.
Stands for Anno Domini. There weren't 33 years of zero. It's just the way people spoke back then about years. It's a reckoning of time,
what they say.
It's
Like,
a standard
this was just
reckoning
convention.
of time. They didn't refer to things as CE, Common Era or Christian Era back then. It's a fairly new thing. And
yeah, it is.
They didn't write AD. They just they translated the Latin into English, Year of Our Lord.
I'd like to point out that CE stands for Common Era, not Christian Era.
It can mean both, actually.
I thought that the Christians say it means Christian Era, and the academics say Common Era.
Even in because the reckoning begins right around the rise of Christianity, and there's no doubting that Christianity had a huge influence on Europe, where the reckoning was used. So it's as opposed to the Roman, what was it, AUB, which is years after the founding of Rome, or I forget the reckoning Jews use. That's like from the beginning of the universe. Common Era, Christian Era are fairly interchangeable terms, even within. Obviously, Christians like Christian Era a little bit more, but interchangeable terms. And then BCE would be before Common Era or before Christian Era.
No, that's before Christ. That is what it stands for.
Yeah.
BC actually, if you're just talking about BC, does mean before Christ.
That's all that matters.
That's all that matters. Before Jesus. But could there really be a BC if Jesus is eternal?
If what?
If Jesus is eternal, if he's God,
yeah.
Can there be a BC? No.
I've heard it said before.
Checkmate, Christians.
So what is BC powder? Oh wait, no, that's
different.
Bad joke.
That's different.
I think we're coming up right to the end of the hour.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
If you haven't read Jenkinson's demolishing of Barton's book, it's worth a look. And in the episode where he talks about it, he talks about it as Thomas Jefferson. He does it like in persona, and then another episode he talks as Clay Jenkinson, and it's pretty good. He's my go-to guy for all things Jefferson.
It'd be better if it was Clay Aikens.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, that's a little too ridiculous, even for the show. All right, so with that said, it's the end of the hour. It's been a good discussion. I think we got off the topic a little bit, trying to make.
We always do.
We always do. We always do. You can always. This show is entirely ad-libbed. Okay, so.
Yeah. You know what I'm gonna do though, man? I'm gonna go looking for my old Dungeons and Dragons monster manual and flip through all those pages of devils and demons because it was awesome.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about the one, like the old school one?
Yeah.
With
had the red dragon on the cover.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. Not the old one. That's the first edition AD&D one, right?
This was one of the first series of hardback books, and it had the monster manual had the red dragon on the cover with like a unicorn and a Pegasus fighting him, and
Yep. Nope. You're thinking about the exact same one I'm thinking about. Yep.
Okay.
Same one. That one's awesome.
It was great
My
because
friend-
it
my
lays
friend
out
Shane had
all. I
those books.
remember it had all of those devils and demons. It had all their names going on, and it had like a correct, almost like biography of them, and put them in the context of their folklore. And it said like, this is the guy that did this, and he was in charge of this, that, and the other thing, and it was great. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn more, you can catch Bob in a new podcast on Zombie Popcorn called Natural Ones. It's a D&D playcast. So.
I don't know, man. I fall back to my D&D roots. I learned so much from that game.
It's fair.
I advocate that it's it was funny too because a lot of the Christian right were against it at the time because this was I was playing that game in the 80s, right in the middle of the Satanic Panic.
Yeah.
And,
Bob's old.
and they didn't like it too much.
Yeah, I remember my friend Shane, his grandmother used to get really upset about us playing D&D.
Oh, but
Really
you learn,
upset.
it teaches you valuable skills. I mean, you're doing quick arithmetic in your head, so math skills get sharpened, your imagination gets going. You read vocabulary.
Yep. The
Lots
reason why
of games.
geeks do it.
Butterfly in the sky.
All right. Anyway, if you have any questions, comments,
My plus
you
two
want to
shirt
start
of
a
slaying.
game of D&D with Bob, contact us 757-337-2195. You can email us nonreligion@zombie-popcorn.com. You can get us on Facebook, facebook.com/thisnonreligiouslife. Google Plus, put us in your circles there. You can listen to us, rate us, leave us feedback on iTunes. You can, if you're downloading is not your thing, you can just get the Stitcher app. It's in a lot of brand new cars now, BMWs and Fords. Just built right in, and no syncing or downloading necessary. You just play it, select the show you want to listen to, and play. And of course, you can just always go to the website, zombiepopcorn.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Jason puts it together every week. It has all the new shows, including this one, Talking Dead, Natural Ones, the brand new show, Coalesce. And, of course, great giveaways. I believe the giveaway for my book is coming to an end soon. Am I correct?
That is correct.
So go get in on that. You can find all that information on the website. And we will see you next week.
Later.
Bye.
All right. Blog, 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 blog.
Got out here.
I thought I was a good Christian.
Jesus died on a cross. I go to church every Sunday. Just got out here. Then I read that this Jesus died on a cross for a rotten hooker.
I thought I was a good Christian.
I go to church every Sunday.
I thought I was a good Christian.
I go to church every Sunday. I'm a very religious person.
I thought I was a good Christian. The very lies the serpent told to Eve in the Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of Jesus Christ. Spreads confusion and promotes lies. The gospel of